Hello guys, welcome to Development Economics. This is lecture 12 and today we're going to talk about international trade and development. Whether the trade is useful and important for the development or whether open trade has some limitations and cause some problems for development as well. So first, to begin with, we need to introduce some indicators how we can calculate openness to trade. So it's very simple. We take export plus import and divide by GDP. That simple indicator gives us what part relatively to GDP trade plays in the economy of a particular country. Going from that, we dive into whether the trade, or in particular open trade without protection, without borders, is useful for the development. And again, as pretty much with any problem, we have polarized views on that, and we don't know for sure. We don't know for sure the answer for this question. We have some opinions of economists, but if you take the data and the real life situation, we have a lot of problems, and it's also one of the hottest topic of discussion, especially recently with the new administration in the United States and with Brexit. Those are developed countries that used to promote open trade and free trade. United States was pretty much the first country to argue for that, for the open trade, and incentivize other countries to participate in that, especially after Second World War. However, we have now an administration that opposes free trade and looks more protectionist. It killed Trans-Pacific Partnership. It had a lot of negative comments about that. And all other actually cooperation with other countries in trade, and as we heard about environment as well, those cooperations seem to be positioned as they are against US interest in this case. So definitely there is something that open trade can play negative for a country. So we're gonna study and discuss those topics. First, even though we don't know whether the trade could lead to development as well, if it's necessary, but we can make for sure there is no country that is successful that is not trading with other countries. The more country trades to at least a certain level, we can't say that the more it trades it's better after some time, some level of trade. However, if the country doesn't trade, it's not developed. The countries that limit their trade, as it was with, well, nowadays we have only North Korea, Iran, some countries that basically not choose, but rather isolated by global community from major trade cooperation. And also, if you take developing countries, most of them have limited amount of trade with other countries. However, if you take developed countries, usually they have quite large network of trade. And in particular, what's important when we talk about trade, before we jump into theories and so on, it's important to understand there is a big difference in quality. There is trade that is governed by top corporations or the government itself. In many developing countries, the only, or pretty much the only institution that trades with other countries is the government and government-related enterprises. That limits development a lot. And again, it's a fact. There is no successful country that limits trade only to the government institutions. So we can say that at least certain level of openness is necessary to be a developed country and to catch the development. It makes sense because that's whatever you trade, usually, and first of all, it's a technological innovations. That's the first thing you trade. So if you limit that, and you can look at those countries that try to do that, you will have a society that is way below the technological level of development. If a normal ordinary citizens are not able to access internet, are not able to join the global knowledge, have computers, so without that you cannot catch up with the world progress. Whatever your country policy is, it's just impossible to do that. So the minimum amount of trade is, or actually not minimum, just certain normal level of trade, and also trade availability for small companies. So a big argument now is for globalization, also as a larger process, but highly related to trade, or basically based on trade originally. It's called inclusive globalization. So the problem with globalization, all those facts and related to trade, the facts that we have a lot of imported goods, especially again US, is a problem number one, is huge import. So we do trade, but for US it results in a huge current account deficit. So we have high import relative to our export. So inclusive globalization or inclusive trade means that not only large companies participate in this process, but a small and medium business, but also even small business, take part in this. And that increase efficiency and the gains from trade are not distributed only to the top, to the government or to top companies, but also small business can get that efficiency too. So having that in mind, we go to how trade basically affects. So I will not jump into trade theories. I hope you took one of the classes related to that, either international trade or if in business school, Business 313. Those classes cover the international trade theory, the comparative advantage, competitive advantage, absolute advantage, those standard theories. So by this time, I hope you know what is this. If you're not, just recall, just have a look. It's not quite important the theoretical basis. It's important what is the result of that argument or that model. And the result is that if two countries trade, in particular comparative advantages, the widespread and kind of most powerful theory, if two countries are trade, both of them, in most cases, both of them can benefit. And practically it works as well. It is quite hard to find a way or an example when you trade, two countries trade and one is disadvantaged. However, why we have so many problems related to that? If even empirically and theoretically we say, well, open trade is good. The problem is that we take country, our economists really like that, they take country as a whole or something unique unit and they trade, so say US and China, very popular example, US, China, now they want to limit trade. So the theory says, and empirically, that if countries trade, overall they create some extra product. So overall, the world is better off, or the two countries overall, on some summation, they're better off. However, what happens? Problem number one is the distribution of these gains between the countries. And in fact, this problem, even though for economists it's kind of number one problem, but in real life the countries can argue for themselves and usually meet somewhere in between, even though in case US, China, US has more political power and economic power because of investments in China, so they probably actually get more gains from trade as a country. But what is completely missing, I would say, from theory, or at least mainstream basic theory that is in textbook, but economists, of course, pay attention to that, and there are articles and research dedicated that the distribution within the country. So yes, US open a trade with China or with Mexico. There are some gains that US gained, and net US has a surplus than before the trade. But that surplus does not go to anyone. That surplus goes to those who trade. That's why inclusive globalization is very important. There is a huge inequality. The company, let's say, again, we take Apple, actually they are not using China that much. The most of components come from Japan, Germany, and Korea. And China just assembled the phone, and the added value of China in iPhone is actually quite small compared again to other countries. However, just let's say for simplicity, US designs phone and produce them in China and then sell it back to other countries. If before the trade US would have to produce that phone in United States, even though technologically it won't be possible and the phone will be way more expensive. So that are the gains of trade. The result that iPhone is quite cheap, and that because it is produced in other countries. However, what happened? You have more people benefit from inside production. Production inside United States. You have workers, you have you have more employment, and you have low skilled labor as well, assembling iPhones and so on. First, you have more people, and then you have different type of people. You have low skilled labor versus maybe scientists and so on. And also you have a duplication between the countries. So when you open and trade, even though there is a net benefit for United States, unfortunately, in reality, that net benefit is completely captured by business. It's not redistributed to the society in a way that everyone feels that benefit. It's one point. And second point, that benefit that goes to society is in the form of low prices for the goods. And that benefit is not really something that you can feel, because a lot of goods, actually, they are not declining in prices. As you see, iPhone still cost, even the price is not decreasing, even though the production cost actually go down. So they try to improve the quality for the same price. That's true, but in any case, even with the goods where the price decreasing, it's still very hard to associate this gain with the open trade, especially if you have a job loss. So on one side, you have people that are affected very negatively because they lose jobs, or they don't have a job, or they are on a very competitive market. So for United States, the problem is the low paid jobs. There is high demand for people with high quality knowledge, programmers, designers, those who create high-tech products. They earn tons of money, there is huge demand for them. However, for low-skilled workers in the United States, that decreased demand because they have to compete with China and Mexico. That's true. That part that politicians bring, that's quite true. However, the solution to that is not to limit the trade. That's a big misunderstanding, a kind of misconception that is very popular in the United States. Oh, let's not trade with China and not trade with Mexico, then we will be better off. No, that's mathematically impossible, because you need to produce goods, means they will be more expensive, and as a country, there is no way you can win because you are not competitive. So the solution that implemented in most actually developed countries, that's why European countries, Japan, they don't have such even employment problems. You see Germany, Sweden, minimal wage, I was mentioning in Germany, $25, but unemployment is very low. It's kind of pretty much, there is no unemployment there. Why? Because people get education. So because the government had a higher role there, so the gains from trade are taxed and redistributed to the population in a form of safety net. So if you don't have a job, or you have your set of skills is no longer useful in Germany, the government of Germany will provide you some education or provide you some support for you to become a useful and productive citizen. So again, as a previous lecture, we need a smart government. The government has to understand that what's going on, who wins from the trade, whether it's corporation or whether it's foreign corporation, maybe it's a local corporation or investors. They need to target who got that benefits, because overall, again, country is winning. US is winning from trade with Mexico and China and any other country, but the gains are going somewhere. And in case if nowadays with modern financial system, it's really hard because the gains might never even be in United States physically. That's what happened with Apple recently, and they're fine for Ireland. They trade, let's say Apple create this business chain and they trade, they get a lot of gains from trading with China and other countries, but those gains not even going back to United States. They are in Ireland with low taxation, actually zero tax on foreign operations. That's why they're there. And there's no gains. They're not taxed in United States. And there was a huge scandal in news with Apple, but it's not just Apple. Actually, any company, literally, pretty much any company, unless there are some exceptions where they're, very patriotic CEOs that refuse to do that, just voluntary. But any company that has a global operation is minimizing their tax. They set up a financial institution in a low tax or zero tax country like Ireland. Actually, you can set up it even in the United States, in the state of Delaware. State of Delaware offers zero tax on foreign operations. So if you're a foreign company set up in the state of Delaware, you will not pay taxes. That's why they have so many companies statistically registered there. So for US government, they don't even have this power to track that. And that scandal with Apple was that the company has enormous amount of cash. And what they did, they took a loan to repay, to actually buy back shares. So even though they have a lot of money, they took a loan in United States to buy back shares, kind of increase their share price. And it looks stupid if you have so much cash, why you take loan? And they realized that all the cash was outside United States, and you take a loan inside the United States, so you can pay back the loan without paying taxes. And that's what they did. So everyone was kind of offended by that, even though and we are talking about, again, billions of dollars. It was around $40 billion of cash at that time and $15 billion of buybacks, or something around that, as I remember. So that type of operation is very common. So the government, it's very hard for them to actually harvest that benefits. They go to private companies, private investors, and that's why we have such a negative impact, a negative kind of perception of open trade. But again, if we limit the trade, you think those rich people will lose their money? No, because of the global economy, they just move from US to another country. They move to Canada, or if not Canada, they move to Europe, or there are 200 countries in the world they can manage where to put their money. So the limiting of trade will not solve the problem. If you need jobs, you need a strong, smart government that will force the companies, also independent government. I feel like it's a big problem in many countries. Independent government that is not influenced that much by business. So the government could make decisions on behalf, of course, useful for business, but with a balance for people. And if you have a huge unemployment and you have problems with those states, industrialized states, they lost their jobs, and people are angry, and they are angry on corporations that lost the jobs. They think that's a common, again, perception here in the United States. Even we had a meeting in a university in East West Center and with a very famous trade economist, and we had a visitor who just came because it was open talk. He just came and said, whatever you're talking is total irrelevant because they steal our jobs. I used to work, I used to get paid, and now they produce. He was working in textile, he was making some kind of clothes factory on the mainland, and now the factory closed. Well, not now, but kind of 20 years ago the factory closed, and after that he is miserable. So the guy was very angry. But that's why you guys who study economics and business should understand the reason and the chain of events, because those jobs that they lost, they didn't go to China in a way that is very used. Kind of politicians like to say, oh, jobs are going to China. Well, and economists also say jobs are going to robots. Well, or technically mostly to robots, but both concepts are wrong. The job itself, yes, he was making clothes physically, and now some, let's say, Chinese guy making clothes. But he was paid, as that guy said, he was paid $20 or something around that. I think he was, or maybe $12. He was paid $12 an hour, and the Chinese guy is now paid maybe less than $1 an hour. So the job is not a physical production of clothes, but the money. Yes, Chinese guy, you might consider he's still not your job. He's still $1 out of 12 from you, if you put this in such language, which again, not quite correct. But if you want to track the problem, let's use it. Let's take the opponent side and use that language. Yes, if someone steals your job, but it's not the Chinese guy or guy in Philippines, in sweatshops, those poor children who are not paid cents, less than $1 an hour. Maybe I thought even like 15 cents or something, and you were paid $12. No, you should take your job not as a physical job, but as a money. From those $12, just one went for worker, and then $11 went to the owner of the business in United States, owner of the respectful partner in China, and a government official in United States as donations, and a government officials in China as, again, some kind of official or unofficial support of the government. So the government that make decision to let it happen without increased taxation on companies, without safety net, without the standards of quality. So another reason many countries try to affect their trade partners with equality. That's an important issue, quality of workforce. So that was, again, in textile industry was quite a bit of scandal. So people work in sweatshop with no any reasonable even conditions for labor. So there was pretty huge movement, political movement, to ban the companies that do that. So the companies here in the United States, some of them at least, they try, and especially again in Europe, Japan, Australia, Canada, those countries are more, I would say, active in such kind of problems. So they respond more aggressively to such problems. So they say, well, we should impose the labor standards on our trade partners. Yes, we cannot directly influence the labor law in Philippines or China, But we can select. If you want to work with us, if you want to import your goods to France, you better make sure that your people that working for your company in China, they satisfy the at least minimal requirement of safety and kind of sort standards of working conditions. So that is possible, that is done, but unfortunately not that much. And the main reason, the main out of those $12, they went to actually your fellow American. They didn't went to China, they went to United States, to a guy who owns the business. And physically, they are not even, as I said, they might not be even in United States, they might be hidden in somewhere from taxation, because they don't want to pay even this low tax that is in United States, corporate taxes, quite low compared to other countries. So you need a huge and again very smart system of government that could capture, and in a way you cannot capture them as criminals in that way. You need to persuade that the government is effective, that those money that you pay in taxes are going for good purposes, and that's very important. And in fact, it sounds quite unrealistic, but in many countries, people do pay taxes because they think that's in corporation as well. Corporation pay high taxes because they see the benefit of that. And hope in the movie that you saw some examples from Europe that it actually is, and there is a benefit if it works for a long time. Yes, maybe not in the beginning, but after 10 years, when a new generation comes, they are educated, they don't worry about how to survive, they have innovative ideas. So for companies, it's easy to work with them, and they see the benefit of this high taxation. However, that's a very hard to start such progress, and actually no one even tried. So Bernie Sanders' policy was kind of like that. He was against trade as it is, and in a way proposed also limitations for trade, but together with this taxation and support of workers that he openly said he borrowed from Europe. So that's nothing bad with that. However, it didn't we don't see the implementation because he didn't win the election. What we have now is a bit strange, because on one side the corporation like free trade, so the Trump as support of businesses, he kind of should support free trade, but officially he's against free trade. So for me personally, it's a bit confusing policy. I don't see any kind of consistency in that, but I think I'm not the only one. So we can see only the results, I guess, and guess what happened. But for you need to understand. So trade, statistically, pretty much, except some really strange occasions that mathematically again possible that one country is disadvantaged from another one, but that usually means that that country that is disadvantaged has either corrupted politicians, or they're just so weak that they couldn't stand and negotiate a better deal for them. In practice, it really never happens. Maybe, well, we had some kind of that situation between Russia and Ukraine, when Ukrainian government was bribed by Russians and they negotiate a very harmful deal for the energy resources, so that Russia will benefit. But that's a lead to political change in a way that lead to revolution in my country. So such, it's not normal. Like normally, as a basic rule, and it's 95% of the chances that trade benefit both countries. And the real problem is that the distribution of those benefits are very unequal. They contribute to inequality that we were talking before, and they, and a lot of people might be left over. However, it's possible, and again, most countries make it work quite well, at least to recent times. Now we have this again backlash with United States and Britain as well, and some other countries are not happy too. But in general, it's still there are more supporters of trade, and especially if it goes and combined with kind of safety net and social support. If the government managed to arrange business in a way that those benefits are distributed within the country to more people, then it works. Another thing we need to know about trade is actual successful stories. As in this course, we are focused mostly on developing countries. Pretty much the best cases of countries that jump from developing to almost developed, it's a combination, or the reasons for that were a combination of free trade and foreign direct investments. So FDI, we're going to study a little bit later. That's pretty much the number one economic argument and in real argument for the way for a developing country to accelerate development and come closer to developed countries. It's foreign direct investment. So attract them, to use them effectively, and then develop. And it doesn't guarantee, again, everything in this course is just some elements that are not guarantee you development, because we don't know what guarantees. But we have the example of success that you need to know. It's Asian tigers. So it's few countries in Asia. It's South Korea, Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore, I believe. And we have also Chile in Latin America, kind of lonely Latin American tiger. As of now, those countries, as well as Eastern European, Czech Republic, Poland, to a large extent, now Romania, Bulgaria, kind of going there, Slovenia and former Yugoslavian countries, Croatia, Slovenia. They are maybe not there yet, but quite impressive jump. They made quite an impressive jump from a being poor developing country to a being almost developed. Maybe again not as developed as rich in terms of income as United States or Germany, but quite close. Not really closer to developed countries rather than to development. Those countries benefit specifically from openness to trade. They were closed. They attract foreign direct investment. I'm going to talk about that later, but they all also in combination with the openness to trade. And they specifically targeted some strategies. A strategy with import substitution and export substitution. So for a country, all those countries were relatively closed at some period of time when they were developing, then they have this kind of revolution in their mind, in the mind of politicians who rule the country, that we need to trigger this openness. And when you open, there are two options. Sometimes you combine them. So you look at the industries, and first you look what can you potentially produce that could be better on the world market. So you look on the world market and you see, well, what have I skills for, or resources, natural resources, that I can produce with a relatively small amount of investments. I can make a world-class product and export that. So I'm targeting an export. That my strategy is kind of export driven. And another strategy usually, so the export driven strategy also very often is supported by foreign investors. For example, here in US, there is a businessman, a businessman who see a lot of options to reduce their cost or improve their quality. So they see the price in US is usually very similar to world market actually, because it's open trade, large country. That's a conditions for the price within the country to be close to a world price. So they see the price, let's say for cars or some machinery, they say it's quite high. If I go to South Korea, I can get the same thing made twice cheaper. So that is kind of an export driving investments. You want to invest in country, create some production and export back to your country. That is kind of double win, because if you are from US, you invest in South Korea, you already know US market. It's easier for you to bring stuff back. You probably have some connections here, otherwise you won't do that. So you have some idea, and then you can export to other countries. Yeah, you have some bases in US, maybe you go to Canada, Europe, and that's how it worked. Another thing, you have a import substitution that is usually good for larger developing countries, and the goal here, in a way, that's how China works largely. They see a good that is done very well in developed country, and the developing countries usually buy all the technologies, all the stuff that they cannot produce themselves. So the China is very good in that. They see, well, if they made in US, I know, the energy generators or something, then we can do that. We can target, we can put money in this production, and we can make it cheaper. Well, usually they don't target better in quality, we all know, but they target cheaper. So if you like similar quality but twice cheaper, that's a strategy. And that, in a way, that you make an import substitution. So within your country, usually, again, you need a smart government. Nothing works in development without smart government. The government sees, oh, we can produce wind turbines that are now made in America by General Electric. We can make the same twice cheaper, or 20% cheaper. They invest in that, they accumulate money. If they don't have money, China didn't have money in the beginning, they attract capital. That's where foreign direct investment comes along. So they attract, but there is a demand within the country, and that's why usually it works for large countries. Like China, there is a huge demand for wind turbines. So all of them, at some point, were coming from other countries, from United States, actually, from Ukraine as well. We have a quite famous energy and engine production company. So exporting to China, so the same. They look at that, and then they try to create local business that will substitute those foreign products, and then maybe export. But export in this case is minor. You are fighting for the domestic market. And the next level, so again, each of these plays part for specific type of country. So Asian tigers and Chile mostly focus on export, and there was a very convenient period of time when the technology was switching. So that period of time required all the companies pretty much in the world, like when computer became popular, all the companies in the world had to install computers. So that was a technological shift, which requires a company to conduct a lot of investments in this infrastructure. And in this time, it's very easy to switch location, because if you have a working factory of producing cars, in Detroit, and switch it to produce cars in South Korea, that's a huge long process. You will not shut down it, and it costs a lot. However, some stuff with the technology you really need to perform. You need to basically update your factory to a new level with high-tech technology. So in that period of time, and it was 80s and 90s, but mostly 80s, that's where it kicked off, and there was a dramatic change in technology. Those countries, again, Malaysia, Taiwan, South Korea, those countries became very successful in attracting capital for this export orientation. countries like China, Brazil, the larger countries with a good internal market, they combine, yeah, they also focus on this foreign export part, but they mostly focus on substituting and competing with those goods that were imported inside the countries. And yeah, pretty much that's kind of two main reasons. Countries like Czech Republic and Slovenia, the small countries that have good network with developed countries, they can exercise relatively very sophisticated but very effective strategies. So that's how can they can be jump to a really high level of development, which they they open the trade. So they are not targeting specifically export or import of final goods. They are not trying to get the whole stuff like car or engine or iPhone, but they want to focus on a smaller things that would be parts of computers, parts of machine, parts of that they can do best. And they they implement open trade for the country to be like a part of this global chain. And usually it's good for small countries because even a little bit, even something very small that can add a lot of value for such country. And in particular, very often it's financial service. So Switzerland and Singapore are #1 in the world by many rankings because of financial sector. They created this type of service that is unique for a lot of companies, and it's a small part for most of that. It's just a small part of the whole production, or it's just a small office in the country, but systemically that creates a huge impact for the country. And in general, that's kind of an open trade. So it's not particularly targeting export or import. It's just targeting the being in a global production chain or financial chain. Just get into there to be, basically statistically, it looks like they export tons of things and import tons of things that are very similar, but they add just a little bit there. And again, usually financial service, they maybe buy some parts, or Singapore usually used as a gate, or Hong Kong gates to invest in Asian countries. So if you are located in US and you want to build a factory in China or Vietnam, you won't go to the factory place directly. You better open office in Hong Kong or Singapore, and from that region you can kind of jump into. So that's their goal. For Switzerland, I guess it's banking and some financial operation within the world, and started from Europe. But those countries got success using this very sophisticated strategy. That would be all. That's a hot topic about trade and development, but hope you get the point. And again, it's open for discussions. It's up to you to decide how you think it, whether what the government should do, how we can structure the government, or whether we tax people or we maybe persuade people using some ethical arguments, or you make it more transparent. In a way, it works also. There are so many problems because no one understands that. If you explicitly tell that your job, to all those workers, that your job were not stolen by Chinese workers, no, they were stolen by the particular people that you can find from statistical reports, financial. And if there will be understanding of people of this production chains and to find a real course of problem, then the people will support the political movement to make it right. And also the decisions are the strategies are very different. There was my research also related to that in a way that affected the migration of people from, let's say, Mexico. And there is, again, we need to build a wall to prevent Mexicans to come, illegal immigration. Of course, illegal immigration is bad, but it's related again to trade and difference in countries. If you realize, if you go beyond, if you understand why they come to Mexico and how, they come to United States, how interconnected your trade pattern are and your work balance is, then you will see that actually preventing, again, building any walls in the common world is just not working very, very right. Especially if you have a power as the United States, you actually have a power to influence economically other country. And it's just simple logic. If the Mexicans immigrate illegally here, this means the conditions of work and labor and life in Mexico is really bad. So they take an illegal action to come here. And there were also research on that in fact, to fight that process, US should invest in Mexico more and not limit the trade, but popularize the trade and create a maybe a little more beneficial conditions for Mexico that will be more inclusive. So, because in US, again, it's not US people who are winning those gains, it's US owners of corporations. They already won a lot, and the people have this negative, as economists like to say, negative externality with illegal immigration. So if you don't want that, you need to step away from your supporting your corporate interest in this trade negotiation and perhaps give more to Mexican government or companies, but again, make sure that as again, smart government, it cannot be done by, in 2-3 words by people who don't understand what's going on. You need to be sure that the gains from trade will go to, at least partly, will go to Mexican citizens. Then they stop immigrate. That's easy, and then you can build a more tight economic ties if using the trade. So that's how it works. That's interesting research, but again, it all relies on a very smart political economic strategies that in reality are very hard to implement, even though it happens. It happens in many countries. They do that in this modern world, especially even in China, with a totalitarian government, you would think, oh, communist government or autocratic, you may call it as you like, but we get used that government is not effective, but because of the global competition, yes, they're not effective from theoretical point of view because of lack of internal competition, but as a global player, they have a global competition and they're quite effective in many ways. We have even the recent climate change issues and environmental innovative technologies. They try to be the best in the world, so they feel a competition and they try to develop a quite smart political strategy. Economic strategies from the government. I was personally impressed. And of course, European, Japanese, Australia, Canada, those countries, they can do that. Not always, not everywhere, but it's possible. And I believe US actually done that a lot in especially 90s, actually, again, with the support of venture capital and IT technology. That was very smart and it did work out. So there are a lot of smart historical and actual right now types of actual policies that are working, but not unfortunately related to international trade right now. So need to think about this. Okay, that will be all. Good luck.